Welcome back for episode 13 of Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on January 14th, 2016. This is your host, Blue Crew 86, along with our co-host, Justin Sane 0516.
We're not worthy.
And Steeman Willie Beeman.
We are definitely not worthy.
We also have with us tonight a well-known and respected member of the Destiny community who many of you will know from his numerous YouTube submissions, as well as being a co-host on the Guardian Radio podcast and a fellow lore fanatic. My name is Bife.
You are all worthy, more than worthy. Seriously, never utter those words again. You are all worthy.
Our topic.
You don't have to consider the idea of worth. We are all sitting here as equal lore nerds, and frankly, I'm delighted to be in good company. So yeah, let's enjoy this amazing moment where four nerds can get into a chat together and just be nerds for once, because we do not get to do this enough.
That is true. Very true.
That is true.
So our topic for this episode, or this chat, is going to be an examination of the Ahamkara and the worms. Before we get into that, however, I just want to run through some quick notes. Our last chat was a brief summary of the Hunter class of Guardians. If you missed that and have any interest in hearing our thoughts on it, please be sure to check out our Podbean site at focusedfirechat.podbean.com for archives of all previous chats. As many of you already know, Focus Fire Chat is a cross-community gathering where the intent is to offer a week-long, in-depth view of a particular subject from within the lore of Destiny. This chat begins every Tuesday morning and runs until the following Tuesday, with topics decided by the group via a poll that begins every Friday and ends on the Tuesday morning for the new chat. Every Wednesday, generally around 10 p.m. Central, we get together to stream a recap of the previous week's chat for anyone who is unable to participate. The topic for next week's chat has already been decided and is going to be over the war mines. So, with all that out of the way, let's look at what we know about the subject of this chat, the Ahamkara and the worms. I'm going to hand that off to Justin and Willie to start that.
Well, I have my favorite website up, of course, ishtarcollective.net. I do have their basic summary of the Ahamkara, if you want me to go with that.
Yeah, let's kick that off.
Fire away.
All right. A species first encountered by humans on Venus, said to resemble dragons. They were exterminated by the Order of the Tower. The Ahamkara appeared for a time after the Traveler terraformed Venus. They are described as the dragons that made promises, and many Guardians made deals with them for knowledge and power. The Tower came to the decision that the price of these deals was too high, and ordered the Ahamkara to be made extinct in what came to be known as the Great Ahamkara Hunt. Evidence suggests that it was primarily the warlocks that were responsible for wiping them out, although some non-warlocks certainly contributed. Following their extinction, the Ahamkara continue to be of interest to Guardians, although the study of Ahamkara lore is frowned upon by many. So, there you have it. They made deals with us. They made deals with the people of Harmony, which we'll get into later. But these Ahamkara, they gave us wishes that we needed, obviously. You know, they granted us knowledge and power that we did not have, that we needed. But for whatever reason, we don't know what this price is, which I'm sure we're going to try to dig into later.
I'm sure we won't ever speculate on that.
Yeah, we're going to speculate on that forever, dude. But
may I say, by the way, so sorry to interrupt, I had no idea that this site existed, and it's officially
my favorite
thing in the world.
Dude,
what?
I love it.
You will think that I'm a Stone Age person here, but I'd been collecting these references by hand. I'd been gathering.
You poor soul.
I scrolled through in Saint 14 when I looked up lore on him. I scrolled through the entire database, through every single class, so I could find every single item that referenced him. And there's a site here where it's stuff like, hey, we did that for you. And I'm just sitting here feeling like I'm an idiot.
So here's the fun fact. So you know how awesome that site is? Guess how many people run that site?
How many?
One.
What?
I think we were chatting with him on he's on the Destiny lore Reddit. They're featured a couple weeks back. Just as a side note, he actually was making a comment. He's like, "Yeah, I got 2 more people to help me, so I have a team of 3." Everyone on the Reddit post was like, "What? What?"
I mean, dude, he's so awesome. This is my go-to site, ishtar-collective.net. It's just so. I love the fact that he pretty much tries to stick with the facts, and he has everything, even stuff that's been deleted from the database since is in here, and he'll tell you, hey, it's deleted, but just so you know, this is what it says.
Yeah.
So
Bife's
legend just grew tenfold.
Oh, yeah.
How he did what he's done.
He's going to become even more efficient.
Dude,
oh god, yeah. Now
I don't
Bife is
understand how I
unstoppable.
can live without this now. Seriously, you guys have just
Seriously,
changed
dude.
my life.
Bife is now unstoppable as far as the lore
So
goes.
what I just heard was Bife's YouTube production is going to double.
Some exciting stuff coming up. So this is going to.
You heard it here first.
You know what's really silly? I've been going back and forth constantly trying to cross-reference facts and stuff and be like, I need to just gather all the Grimoire cards for the Elixir on this latest episode. It's right there. It's
And
right
and then
there.
also underneath all the cards, if you scroll down, there's all the
It's
items.
got the items too, which is my
Yeah.
favorite part because that's like the little flavor text is so Dark Souls-ish in terms of like the way the lore works, right? Like you're always looking at these little things and it's like, oh, this has a little kind of little kind of subtext where it talks about how, okay, Wei Ning is basically a badass woman. You know, she definitely was one of the best Titans in the world. And you'd never find that if you didn't just look at this random blue piece of armor. This is wow. I can't even.
Oh yeah, I know.
What's even nice about it, and Pins just brought this up too. It actually works really well on mobile devices. So when you're on the run, like most of us are, and we're chatting on our phones, and we can
That's where I look
cross-reference
at
it,
it all the time.
you can cross-reference it, and it actually is very easy. Some sites usually they don't correlate very well on mobile, but yeah, they've knocked it out of the park as far as I'm concerned with that site.
Absolutely, man. I'm always using my phone to look at the lore, so I could tell you that it's just so spot on and amazing.
I must
And I can't believe
apologize,
Bife
by
has
the
never
way,
heard of it.
because I've totally just sidetracked
We're-
this entire podcast.
Yeah,
No,
Bife is now like just gonna be silent because he's now looking at Ishtar.
Yeah,
Bife, you
me
can
a
do
couple of
whatever the hell
decades,
you
like-
want.
Oh my god.
So
I think
go
it's
for it.
awesome. We just showed Bife something. That's freaking amazing.
I have it noted
It
down.
is.
I'm gonna hold it over him maybe for a week or so.
Well, you know, dude, I'm gonna accept. Like you guys again, like I said, you come to a place where I am as much a learner as anyone else. You know, like there are points where you sit down and you just read a random grimoire card, and then you think to yourself, it's something I've never read before, but it illuminates something entirely different. This is that same feeling on steroids. So you can hold that over my head as much as you like. I'm the one who's going to be calling you guys senpai from now on. Put it that way.
Oh wow!
I don't know about that. I wouldn't go that far, but let's swing back around. And so that was the general description of the Ahamkara. I'm gonna try to focus this back, because we can go on for Ishtar Collective for a long time. But so interesting fact. So what I figured we'd do is we'd break it down. Usually what we do, as most people know, is we break out what we know and then we kind of break into what do we think. And so for the what we know part, I was kind of thinking of the approach of let's take, we have the two subjects. We have Ahamkara and the worms. Let's take Ahamkara and let's look at what we know about the Ahamkara. I kind of broke it out in like physical description, and then as far as interaction with the universe or with the mythos of Destiny. And then let's do the same thing with the worms, if that's good for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that'll work.
first off, before we go into the physical description, I'd feel remiss not to point out, and Bife and I kind of were talking about the etymology of the name. It's a really deep rabbit hole, and we probably shouldn't get too far into it, but it actually does have a bit of nod to Vedic mythology. And there's an interesting tie-in that, and Bife actually made this point too, there's an interesting tie also to, in the Vedic mythology, to a traveler figure as well. And actually, we were talking in the chat today, I think it was either Pins or Unisys, I can't remember who brought it up. But Diogenes from Greek mythology and the search for the honest man with the lantern is also a kind of a nod to the traveler in a way. If you look at him, if you look at the traveler as a seeking for a utopian society, that's kind of a nod there as well. But it was just a really interesting. Someone, I think it was Rocket Raccoon on Reddit has and I'll kind of get into that later. But he had or Snoop Rocket for Destiny lore. He had a really, really interesting point about the Vedic connection that we can kind of get into in the what do we think section. But I did want to point that out before we got too far into the physical description. That being said, physical description for the Ahamkara, we have actually a pretty good collection of grimoire fragments, grimoire items, and artifacts that kind of give us a presentation of what we kind of should expect to see for an Ahamkara. And then also, as well, we have the concept art that Bungie had, which obviously, we put it on the banner for tonight's podcast. And a lot of people did make the note. It's concept art, so it could have changed drastically. Bife and I were talking about that before we started the show. The concept art with fantasy items and the tigers and all that. I mean, obviously that's been changed. So it's not admissible to some. Some people have not issues, but they hesitate to say, yeah, this is what an Ahamkara looks like. But my point is, I would say it's important because it gives us an idea of where they started when they started thinking about the Ahamkara, right? And so if you look at it, it's definitely a Western worm dragon look. But we can go, and Justin, I think you're in the notes. Do you want to take the scales?
Yes, I would love to take.
Or I guess do you want me to do the Ghost Fragment Warlock real quick?
Yeah, before we do the scales, let's do the Warlock.
Yeah, I think the Warlock one is important.
You try to explain, but no one ever understands. No one who's not a warlock, who hasn't spent a dozen years scouring the ruins for one string of symbols, one clean code, one black talon. Titans just made a humphin' noise if they stayed awake. Hunters clean their nails with their knives and look at you like you've grown a third eye. But when you've spent your life searching through arcana for ancient power, you have the urge to reach out and educate others, especially if you've had one too many. Nah, she's not my type at all. We've played dice, cards, war games, the usual stuff. I'd never tried to show off before. I don't know what came over me. I had a broken vertebrae in my pocket that I borrowed from, yes, borrowed. I was going to put it back. What do you think you are, my conscience? It was a fossil. That means mineral replacement. A rock, basically. They can survive a few hours in my pocket. Do shut up. The Cryptarchs weren't going to miss it. Everyone knows the Ahamkaras were hunted to extinction. There's nothing to be afraid of anymore. Think of how mysterious the system is. I said how much life sprang up when the Traveler came. Like the Ahamkara. Do you know the legends? The dragon that made promises? And I pulled out the fossil with a flourish. She pulled out her knife and started to pick the dirt from her nails. That set me off. You could never have brought down one of these, I said. Ever. Not the greatest hunter. Not the brawniest titan. Her eyes narrowed. She said, "Oh, is that so?" And I saw right then that she wasn't going to pass on this challenge. I've murdered a guardian, I thought. She's going to die. It's my fault. And I looked at the piece of spine in my hand and wondered, why did I say that? What moved me to such pride?
So, a couple things. Well, and, there's a lot to pull out of that card. I have a couple things that we'll touch on later from that card, but for the physical description, we now know they call them dragons. They obviously have talons, and this card actually connects to a artifact that was released in which we find out the conclusion of this challenge for that hunter.
Talking about the Ahamkara scale?
Yes, which is one of the best artifacts in the game, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yep.
It is funny. It's hilarious. And it just simply has that quote, and the warlock thought I couldn't do it. Ha! It's like, booyah.
It's one of those little references that is so great because only people who've read this stuff will get it, and when they get it, it's like, oh my god, it happened! You remembered.
The other,
It's like, honestly, from the card, you'd think that the hunter couldn't do it.
Well, because remember also,
it's another instance of a warlock underestimating a hunter to the warlock's peril. So,
well, that, and also realize that this is after the Great Hunt.
Which
so
when we read the Great Hunt card, and I think I have it somewhere, we'll get to it. But when you read that card, the ending of the card is like a huge red flag for most people reading the card. It's, of this you can be assured, O reader mine. And it was like everyone was just like, oh,
I got it here. If you want to go with the blue.
Yeah, go for it, Willie.
All right. It's the Ghost Fragment Legends 3, the Great Ahamkara Hunt. After great deliberation, it was determined that the Ahamkara be made extinct. It was not an easy decision. Power had been obtained from the bargains, and the city needed power. Knowledge had been gleaned, and the Ahamkara knew answers to questions no one had thought to ask. But the price was too high, and no edict or forbearance seemed to stop guardians from seeking them out, driven by hope, or vengeance, or despair. The call had to be silenced. So the Great Hunt did its work, and thus the Ahamkara were made extinct, their call silenced, their solipsistic flatteries erased, their great design, if it ever existed, broken. Of this you can be assured, O reader mine. And yeah, that last sentence, O reader mine, because we know that the Ahamkara and the worms both speak like that, which that's the great debate here. Like, what the hell is going on with this, Because the worm gods and the Ahamkara, obviously they have very similar personalities, but to me personally, it seems like, I guess I shouldn't get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into it. We're going to get into that. We will definitely get into that one. But so there's that entire thing, which this kind of, to me, when we got a hold of this artifact, it was kind of another just big nod to, everyone that thought that, you're kind of right. And then we also have the scales of EO. I never can.
Which is a Titan artifact, mind you.
Yes, which also, up until we found this thing, it was interesting to note that there were only Hunter and Warlock items with regards to the Ahamkara and the Great Hunt, which a lot of people took to mean, there are a few, we won't point any fingers at anyone, who think that the Titans never did anything with the Ahamkara. And this kind of was like, okay, no, this actually does kind of point out that there is a relationship of some kind with them, because up until now, like I said, there was only the two classes, and it's noteworthy here, and Dragon does bring this up, and I was gonna actually make this nod too. Up until we get AO, there has not actually been any named Ahamkaras, and so a number of people are actually saying, well, that could be significant, saying that it's not actually an Ahamkara. I'm kind of on the fence. I mean, I could see it going either way. The quote is, "We stand upon our own unending deaths," and which is another nod to there is a difference in the statement phrasing of that as well from the other Ahamkara, and some of the worms as well. There's a bit of a different phrasing on that, so that's another, I guess, discussion that we're having as well, or what we had as well.
Absolutely, especially you look at the bones of AO too. It just says defy extinction.
Right.
Yeah. The interesting thing about it, dude, is prior to the bones of AO being called the bones of AO, they were this is way before when people data mined the game and, first ever looked exotics were coming out. They were in the database under the name The Unremarkable Bones, and the description was something more along the lines of why do the warlocks cling to these old bones? Surely they must have some purpose, O bearer mine. So,
Okay.
it's really interesting to see why the evolution took place. And it does put that idea of, they're trying to build some significant named Ahamkara in here, if it is an Ahamkara at all.
Well, and the other note that I was going to make is, and I think it was Unisys and I that were talking about this in the chat. The next item that we're going to talk about is the confirmation that Ahamkara have bones. So that's another nod to they are a vertebrate creature. But there's a item called the skull of the dire Ahamkara. Now, a lot of people kind of are like, well, they don't really think anything of it. But we were chatting about it, and I'm a big D&D player. So as soon as I read this, I was like, oh, it's a dire animal. Okay, moving on. And like someone, and I can't remember who, I think it was Unisys, it was like, well, what is a dire? And they kind of got into conversation about that. And then I got in there, I was like, well, it's like a dire wolf. It's just, a primordial, more intelligent, more vicious version of an Ahamkara. And that could be a bragging right of, hey, I killed a dire Ahamkara. Instead of, you guys are all taking care of the Ahamkaras. This is a dire Ahamkara. And that's kind of how I read it. And so I don't know if any of you guys have an idea or thought on that interpretation of it.
Well, the thing about the skull of the dire Ahamkara that strikes me is just the look of it. With all the horns and the skull. It just... I think this is the best way to get a look at how they looked. And then, of course, gotta note the fact that it says... reality is the finest flesh, O bearer mine, and are you not hungry? Mm-hmm. So, once again, we have the O bearer mine, O reader mine, all that going on with the talk. But
and also that's a direct quote out of the Books of Sorrow.
Exactly. It's part of those reasons why I'm like, surely it must be. Because I think it's Zivor Arath who's being spoken to by Yul or Aya. I'm not sure which one, but
yeah.
Either
I'm
way,
just going to go out with it. My favorite theory is the fact that the Ahamkara are worms that were touched by the light. Like that's
you're going right for the throat, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm going for the jugular here. Like just the way that they're so similar, but yet the only two races that we have that the Ahamkara made deals with are the bishops of the Harmony, who we know the Harmony were visited by the Traveler and blessed by the light, and Guardians, who, once again, we know are blessed by the Traveler and, blessed by the light. So that's my favorite. That's the one I'm going to hang on to for now until we get more confirmation from Bungie, which will hopefully be soon. Damn it, Bungie, come out with more Grimoire.
Yeah, I'm actually interested to hear Bife's take on the similarities and how you think that correlates.
For me, it's kind of the opposite. I'm going to go ahead and very quickly see if I can find something, because I know it's in the description of my gear. The Warlock set for King's Fall, it is something that basically it describes the Ahamkara in detail, Mm-hmm. And, there's some pretty obvious quotes in there. So, the helmet is...
Yeah. Go for it.
But yeah, in particular, you've got the one item that really stands out, at least for me, is coming from the gauntlets, which is the grasp of Aya. And it says, at the beginning, they stood in the thrall of the Formless One, and they offered themselves to the depth. Like, combine that with all of the other stuff, a clue of writhing things that was also on that cusp between light and darkness. And you sort of get this idea of maybe it's the case that the Ahamkara that we see down there, especially seeing as there's only 5 of them that are actually majorly named and the rest are just some kind of parasitic worm. Maybe it's their offspring, maybe it's not. That's all part of the discussion that I'm sure we're probably going to flesh out later. For me, I think that the Ahamkara would have existed completely separately, and they are a species that has constantly been traveling with the Traveler as it goes across the stars. And for me, it's simply the case that these 5, Yul, Aya, Akka, and Zol, just happened to find themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. They discovered the power of the deep and became enthralled by the darkness. So my theory is kind of similar, but it runs in the opposite direction from Willie's. It's inverse. But at the same time, that quote at the beginning, they stood in thrall of the formless one, and they offered themselves to its depth. That could at the same time mean that they all just started as evil.
And I could totally see that too.
So you're almost saying that the five. Sorry, Willie. Can I finish real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
You're saying So you're saying the Ahamkara are not. They are not. They are related to the worm gods in the sense that the worm gods are Ahamkara that took a worm on.
Which is great.
I'm stating that they're the exact same species, and we just don't understand their biology. The phrase worm and dragon, not only can you sort of mix up the spelling and whatnot, but also we just don't know what they technically look like at the very beginning, so there's no reason that you couldn't use the words worm to also describe a dragon. But then also take into account the fact that these 5 may have lived for an incredibly long time because they have a direct connection to the darkness, because until Oryx kills Akka, basically, so that he can prove that he mastered the sword logic, there is no other individual in the universe of Destiny that is known to have directly communed with the darkness at all. And that kind of power, it's the kind of thing where immediately you can think, these guys could have lived for an incredibly long time if that was their purpose. At that point, I think it's very much the case of the darkness is saying, okay, so we have these individuals, they're capable of reaching out beyond what I can do. I'm going to exalt them and make them more powerful just so that I can finally find a host that is going to be able to lead a marching invasion of the sky worlds above. And, for me, that is kind of the general idea. I always think that the Ahamkara are the exact same thing as the worm gods. And unless there's some kind of outside stimulus, I think of them as very independent beings. They'll offer power if they need to, sometimes to guardians, sometimes they'll be sort of more revered in society, but I have a feeling that's maybe just, my own interpretation. Point is, I see no difference between the two. I see that there's only been differences according to the paths that they took. One went with darkness and one went with one that's more sort of based on independence. And again, like my spin foil is as good as anyone else's, right? So what do I know?
Right, and we know there's a significant amount of similarities between the two, and we'll get kind of into that with the interactions part, because the other thing that the worms and the Ahamkara have in similarity is they both require I guess you would call them supplicants, or their victims, whatever you want to call it. They both require them to seek them out, which we found in the five lives of, I think it's Albion, I want to say, is
Albios.
the one. Albios. Because there's the quote, he didn't come to him until this fourth or fifth life, and by then it was too late.
Fifth life, and it was too late.
Yeah, and so it was, and then we also have, obviously in the Books of Sorrow, we have the worm gods sending out the bait, what I call the bait stars of the deep, the larvae, to the different races of Fundament to see who would come to them. So they both require the supplicant to seek them out, and I have my own long, convoluted theory about that too. But finishing up real quick on the bones piece, the other fun fact is that you have the young Ahamkara's spine. Love it.
Sorry.
Love it. But the interesting thing about the young Ahamkara's spine is, let me pull there's two variations of it. There's the unsealed version, and then there's the sealed version. And there's also an interesting tidbit about the way that the sealed version has been sealed. And so the young Ahamkara's spine says, "Give me your arm, O bear of mine. Let me help you fill the world with teeth." Which, that's kind of nerve-wracking. But the sealed Ahamkara grass says, "Plating the Ahamkara bones in silver helps to quiet the auditory hallucinations, O bear of mine." Fun fact. When you start looking at... So most, I guess, some people were like, oh, it's silver. That's just because it's pretty, whatever. Actually, silver is a really interesting metal. In a lot of mystic rituals, silver in like our world, not Destiny world, silver is viewed as one of the pure metals. It's actually called pureness element, and there's actually a scientific reason for that. Silver actually has a bit of antimicrobial properties, which in medieval times, if you poured water into a silver pitcher, it took longer for that water to become unhealthy, and so people attributed that to a magical property, and so that kind of elevated it also into what people viewed on the same level as gold and platinum and stuff like that. Also, in supernatural elements, you always have silver as a ward to evil, which, going back, why would you seal an Ahamkara's bones in silver? It's to ward the evil out, or to ward the evil from infecting you. A lot of mystic rituals required silver to be either a deterrent or even a means of killing evil forces. You know, the silver bullet from the old werewolf myths. In vampires, the mirrors, you know, one of the reasons vampires in the Victorian period were said not to appear in mirrors was because Victorian mirrors actually were silver-backed. They had a silver plate on the behind the glass. That's actually what the reflection was generated off of. So when they didn't appear in the mirror, the reason was because they were evil incarnate, and silver is pure. They can't show up on that spectrum. And so it was just a really interesting, to me, because that's how I think, it was an interesting thing that they chose to specifically call out that it's sealed with silver. And I'm just going to stop talking because people are probably getting bored with me.
No, that is my favorite armor piece at the moment.
Well, yeah,
yeah. 2 smoke bombs? Are you kidding me? It's amazing.
No, and that was another, because in game it actually gives you a pretty substantial benefit too. It seems like cutting off the ability of the bones actually increases the benefit of it.
Oh well, let's take a look at the other armor pieces that
you want to do the claws next?
Are tagged with Ahamkara as well, like the Void Fang vestments.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it says you will dream of teeth and nothing else, and that is scratched behind the buckle of those. You know, and then of course there's the Cryptic Dragon, the scout rifle. It's legendary. Says those who doubt the existence of dragons are always the first devoured.
Love that quote.
It's so. Oh, wow. You know.
Well, and Barbaric Ham actually just in the chat was asking, you know, hey, are they extinct or not? And I'm going to point to that quote. Yeah, sure, they're extinct. Just, you know, I would, yeah. I'm gonna go with what. Yeah, there was a guy, a really smart.
Aka is.
Yeah, there's a really, really smart hunter that said, you know what you should do every time you enter a room, look up. Let's just keep our eyes to the sky and make sure that they don't come down. Because
I wouldn't call him smart as much as a coward. But.
Hey, you know what? You leave Pancake out of this.
Easy. let's take it down a notch.
I'm just saying. Kabir didn't have to be legionless. He made him legionless.
What moved him to such pride?
Yeah, love it. There's one item I always forget because I think it was a vanilla weapon. It's called the Cryptic Dragon. I never had it, so I always
that's the
Cryptic Dragon is what I literally just quoted.
Yeah. I think he was on Potato Internet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I missed you. It's okay. I didn't miss anything that great.
Fun fact
and then,
about
of course,
that,
there's only one more piece left, and that's the Claws of Ahamkara, which says, "Look at all this life, O bearer mine. There is so much left to burn." Which shows you these things kind of don't really like life.
Does that actually tell you that they breathed fire like a traditional dragon?
A Western dragon.
Yeah.
Some Western dragons.
You could say
I'm gonna
so,
I'm gonna have to tap into the D&D lore on that one.
Well,
I mean, it does want to burn it specifically. I see where you're going with it, Justin.
Even so, it's like if you go into D&D's dragons, it's very much the case that they're all corresponding with different elements.
Right.
I mean, you've got silver dragons, for example, which, if I'm not mistaken, they work with cold as an element, and then
blue is electricity, red is fire, black is acid.
Yeah.
It's a very elemental variation.
It makes me wonder, given Destiny does have this division between Void, Solar, and Arc, do you reckon we could find that?
I don't get my hopes up. Because I would like die of happiness if we had elemental dragons.
Like you see a dragon breathe void fire for the first time, and then you're just like, oh! I'm not even gonna fight him. I'm gonna go try to be his friend. That'll be my clip, is me trying to ride. I'll be an Ahamkara rider of the tower. If they do not have a dragon riding sequence at some point in Destiny, I'm gonna go over to Bungie and slap dude.
Well, do you know? Weirder things have happened.
Gonna bitch slap Deep confirmed.
Yeah. We got swords, which if you told me we were going to get swords during vanilla, if you said, hey, we're going to get swords next year, I would have.
Well, dude, here's the fun fact is that was in the concept art. Bife and I were that was another thing we were talking. It was like swords are in, we actually have spears too in the concept. I mean, the banner for tonight was the war, or what we think the warlocks with the giant sphere ghost things hunting down the Ahamkara. And yeah, I like how Dragon Racing Confirmed is now going in the chat. That's actually a conversation we had on Destiny lore, was Dragon Racing. It's like
Dragon
oh, it'd be so awesome.
It would be so fun. You get Halo gets gun gooses, we get Dragon Racing. It's cool.
I'm fine with that. You can take your gun goose. I will happily allow your gun goose to exist.
Dude, I would play a lot more Destiny if they had dragon races.
I've actually got a question for Bife. Where do you stand on EO? Do you feel he was an Ahamkara? If he was a he, or
I think we don't have enough information to make it up. Honestly, like, it wouldn't surprise me if they were, but the fact that they have bones indicating it doesn't necessarily say whether it was the possessions of someone called Ao, or whether it's the bones that literally came from Ao himself or herself or themselves. So like at that point, it's kind of like you sort of have to ask the question, how far is a piece of string? How far can you drag a name before it becomes a song of praise? Like that's basically, can you call something a paean and call it a name and a song at the same time? You know what I mean. Point is, it's like we don't have the information, right?
Willie is so proud of you right now.
It does say the bones of Ao,
right?
So that
and
makes
it is the only one that breaks the speech pattern.
That's true, exactly.
But that's the question: is Ao a worm or is Ao an Ahamkara? Because so far, it's only Ahamkara that we've made armor out of with their bones. At the same time, we've never had a named Ahamkara so far.
Correct.
Which I think we had a huge we spent a whole day on that and went nowhere in the chat.
Oh, but the names of the worm gods are so fun to delve into. I can totally talk about Yuletide if we really want to.
Can it, Blue?
So, tiny point, I'm going to jump in and say it right now. I sat down and I said, at some point to my sister, I'm going to be on Focus Fire, which is a lore-based podcast. And she was like, do people watch that? And it's like, yeah, people do. But, my sister not playing video games at all. And then I basically said, you do, but, if you watch it for the first time, it's going to be amazing because you're going to be able to get into all this deep lore. And for the other people, it's like, you're essentially sitting down with a team of people that understands what I mean when I say, Ayazol Yul. And then she says, those are places in ancient mythology. And
yes, they are.
Like, what? I did not know this. Tell me. What? Tell me more.
Akka was like Mesopotamia. Ur was a giant capital. Oh, man, I don't have my notes in front of me. Justin's probably happy.
Yeah,
and Manbag in the chat is...
Bro.
Bife, this is a really long conversation you've just sprung.
Oh, Yule alone is just an awesome connection to Germanic tradition. Because Yuletide. I mean, just think about Yule add an E, and that's what the connection that I was able to see. And can I go into it?
No, go
down the
Okay.
rabbit hole, son.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So Man-Bag's going to kill me in the chat. So fun fact, hang on, let me pull up the notes because this just gets really fun. So fun fact about Yule is also the honest worm in Books of Sorrow. Now, the thing about the note that you should make about that is the fact that it deals predominantly with the three Krill siblings, and there is a significant part of the tradition of Yule in which, and I'm going off the top of my head because I don't have my notes in front of me, but there's a significant portion of the tradition of Yuletide that requires the king and the high priest to make a toast, and this toast is very significant, and it takes place after Yuletide has completed. And it's a three-part toast. Well, you have three Krill siblings. Each one of the siblings actually made a oath. They each made a single oath, which gave them 3 oaths. There are 3 toasts, and each toast was actually pretty closely aligned with the 3 oaths that the Krill siblings made. The first oath is I don't have my notes in front of me. I can't remember all the detail off the top of my head, but the first one.
Well, each of the 3 sisters, when it came down to
I'm
the
trying to
worm gods, it was they had to follow their nature.
Right, which is another theory that I have that I will get into later.
Yeah, that's Orash, Well, I can read. I have the categories, the worm gods in front of me.
What were the oaths that they made?
Yes. Vengeance.
Right.
Understanding. Orash vowed to understand the syzygy.
The zigzaggy?
Yeah, the zigzag.
The zigzaggy. It's a zigzaggy, damn it.
Word like that. Oh my gosh. Sorry.
So we have got to get audio of Bife saying the word zigzag.
Okay, found it. Okay, so the toast of Yule, Y-U-L-E, was the first toast was to be drunk to Odin for victory and power to the king. The second were to the gods. I'm not even going to pronounce these correctly, but basically there was to the gods for good harvest and for peace. And thirdly, be drunk to the king himself. If I remember off the top of my head, the oaths of the Krill siblings, the first was to continue.
Conquer the enemies. Right?
Well, the first one was Orash, and Will, you just said it, and I just blanked on it. What was the first oath?
No, it was actually Justin that said it, and that was to understand. Oh, no, she was last.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what was
Zero
what's
was
one?
the first.
The first one was Zero,
Zero.
and that was for vengeance.
Vengeance. Okay,
against
so
Trader Teo.
victory and power, and then the second one was to return and have children, or have a good harvest, because
Actually,
to be fertile.
I believe
even crazier
the
about
terms
that.
were to
And then
To birth her children from the remains of the helium drinkers,
Oh,
right?
kind of like
Yeah,
sowing
kind of
seeds.
Exactly.
So
you
still-
destroy
And-
your enemies conquer.
And you would have
peace.
peace because you wouldn't have any enemies left. And then the third was Orash, in which she said that she would remember her father and understand the zigzaggy, which is the third toast is to be drunk to the king himself.
bastards.
So the Osmian king, you're making toast to the Osmian king via a blood oath, and there's 3 aspects of it, and then these 3 aspects lead them to Yule, which Yule is the tradition. It's a pagan, whatever you want to call it. It's Christmas, guys. It leads to Christmas. Just call it that. And
Don't do that.
oh well, yeah, it probably just pissed
You're
off a
going
lot
there.
of people. But it's.
Are we doing Rudolph lore? Is that a thing?
Do you really want to do that? I could probably BS my way through this if I really had to. But no,
I have no doubt.
but it was a really interesting connection between that. And then of course you have which is a giant city in ancient times. You have Akka, which is another big city. Zol was actually the only one that I couldn't find a connection to, just because I had nothing. Like I spent like hours looking for Zol, and I could not find anything. And then Ir was a really fun one. Ir is actually a Norse goddess that is attributed to medicine, which is interesting because in the Grimoire, you remember that that big ogre with spider legs that we all love because of challenge mode. Do you know who was actually somewhat responsible for the creation of that ogre? It was Ear.
It's Iron. I know it's not Yol, but it's either Ire and Zol or Ire and
Yeah.
I think it's Ire and Zol.
Yeah. But so the Norse goddess of medicine and did a medical experiment on an ogre.
Oh my gosh.
Have fun.
Wow. Oh, the spin foil.
This is a rabbit hole of
we're gonna stop going down this.
Let's just embrace it. I think
it's Ahamkara.
Yeah.
I have to go ahead and say this spoiler at some point down the line when we do get to the spin metal theories at the end. I need to talk Netherverse and just say like the whole bunch of stuff about how the Ahamkara potentially control people's minds. I don't know.
I have a bit to say on that as well.
Well, of course they do. I mean, you could tell that from the hunter card we just did.
Oh no, but more specifically, like how and why they're capable of doing it from beyond death.
Yep.
But
also
we should totally stick on the topic.
Right.
Sorry,
well, try to go back to another side note from the chat. The flying creatures on Venus, they are not dragons. They are actually batadactyls, and that is actually from I think it was the developers that were on the ride along. Yeah. Basically, the story behind them was that it was a mesh up of a bat and a pterodactyl that was used to create an atmosphere for the planet Sandbox, and they could not come to an agreement on what to call them before the game went live, so they just mashed the two names together, and we have batadactyls.
Yeah, can I just say, Bungie is epic at naming things, and this one not so much. This one I think they swung and missed.
Well, they swung and they just, oh my gosh.
They hit something. I don't know whether it was
oh my god. I love the story behind them.
If you look at them, you would think they're dragons.
Right, and there's actually two variations, I guess. There's two types. I have no idea. This is one of the things that I actually didn't notice about Venus, so I don't pay attention. I'm bad at looking in the sky, apparently. I'm eaten by a dragon. But that being said, let's try to get into the interactions with the.
But at least you'll know his ties to Christmas when he eats you.
Yes, exactly. I will. I wish you all a merry. Okay, we're going to move on to interactions. Oh my gosh. Okay, so interactions for the Ahamkara. We know from the Books of Sorrow that they have smug freedom, and this really pisses off the Hive, which actually kind of gives them a thumbs up in my book. But it's also really heavily implied on, I think it's the calcified fragment 45. I can't remember what that one. I'd shut them all in cells.
Where it's Zivu Wrath.
Right, and it's implied that they share gods with the Hive.
Yeah, it says exactly the dragons. Our gods should be ours alone. Their smug freedom is an insult to me. I'd shut them all in cells. Bring them to me. Which, that's Zivu. She's pissed. And she, at this point, does take the actual name of God of War. And it says, pretty much, long story short, they don't want to kill him, which is the most interesting thing to me out of that whole statement there, is I'll shut them all in cells, but I'm not going to kill them. Up until that point, the Hive have been known to exterminate, not just, kill people, but exterminate your whole species. But for these dragons, they'll just shut them in cells.
No, here's the thing, though, dude. With that, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have a contempt that drives them towards somewhat killing them. Because if you remember the line from this is very much mixing two very odd things. But go back to that one line from the Dark Blade where the ghost questions why Oryx has a prison, and Eris is like, prison? He doesn't have a prison. He renders his victims down into chitin for his ships. Look back then to a grimoire card that's a few verses earlier in the Books of Sorrow, where it's verse 411, the Dreadnought, And it says, to make his ship, Oryx skim-shored one piece of Akka who was dead but far from gone. And it's literally a case of saying, the dreadnought is made out of the bones on Ahamkara, practically. There's a certain point at which you can say, like, wow, okay, there is genuine contempt for these individuals. And it doesn't say, yeah, that they're going to kill them. But it's definitely not a case of saying that they don't want to harm them. There is this serious air of spite that goes beyond just saying, you stole our gods, give them back. I don't know, maybe that's me going way spinfoil there, but that's...
No, that's...
I think I think the other fun fact about that is that, so we know that the Hive are obsessed with furthering the control of the worms. I think it's interesting that instead of trying to bring the Ahamkara to under control of the worm, they're like, nope, we're just going to put them in a cell to do whatever. But it's like everything else. It's kind of, I think that it could just be that they've gotten to the, I think there's a mention at this part in the Books of Sorrow that they've gotten to a point that destroying false life is just not even a second thought. It's just a process that they go through. But it was just, to me, it was kind of interesting too, because they had just like, well, I read the Books of Sorrow in one go, so I admit that I'm kind of insane about it. But to me, it was like, we just got done talking about the crusade on Fundament, in which you're like trying to get everyone to be, a host for these things. Which actually I just had a really... Anyways, but I'm like, so why all of a sudden are we just now eradicating? But I guess technically, chronologically, it is pretty far down the road, so... But have we talked about Dragon Wishes? Because anyone? They want to summon the Dragon Ball?
Are you talking about the ones from the Harmony?
Yeah, the Harmony. Oh, come on. You had to, we had to bring up Dragon Ball Z with Dragon Wishes.
All right, fine. It does say... Oh, no. It's not on this card? I could have sworn it was.
It's the Gift Mass. Is where the Dragon Wishes and the Wishful Bishops, I believe.
I've got it.
Yes, it does. Go for it.
Now arrives Siva. Oh, go for it, sorry.
Oh, no.
No, you read it better.
No, by all means.
Yeah, I think you should read one, Bife. I think this would be a growing experience for all of us.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, the Gift Mast. It towers above this star system like a monument to treason. It beams with silver light. It sings a radio lullaby made of soothing lies. In its light live the Harmony, and they are now our prey. Now arrives Xivu Araf at the head of her armada. She fights the Harmony for 50 years with strategies and discipline, but the Harmony turn to dragon wishes, and their wishful bishops wrestle Xivu Araf in the ascendant plane. Xivu Araf falls into deadlock. Next arrives Savathun, flanked by her chorus and her celebrants. They trick their way onto Anna Harmony in disguises so that they might vivisect these dragons. Our worm god laughs and laughs. For 100 years, Savathun keeps the secret covens among the Harmony. I don't know if there's any more on the guys there, I do. On the Ahamkara?
No, not
point,
yeah.
At that point, it's just like Oryx comes along and he's like, "Yo,
you all screwed up, and I'm gonna kill everyone." What is this mess that you made? Pick up your toys.
Well, I think it is important to note that they do say that Xivu Arath kills the wishful bishops, and Savathun achieves some secret purpose, which we don't know what the hell that secret purpose is as of yet. But plenty of people have their theories, of course.
Yeah, this card. I mean, there's no direct link to tell us it's 100% an Ahamkara, but it's just too many coincidences. I feel like a detective. I don't believe in that many coincidences.
This is the thing, right?
Yeah, it's a game.
Insane. So, like, in the first instance, you've got to remember that sometimes coincidences don't exist when there's a writer deliberately leaving you clues for this, right? So it's kind of like when you take a look at sort of the origin stories behind the Traveler and how it links into cosmic creation myths and all these other really interesting references to it. At a certain point, if you delve deep enough into that lore, you have to say that the threads cross so many different times that you abandon the idea that it's a coincidence altogether, and every single thread is deliberately placed from that point onwards. And it's very much, in my mind at least, the same thing with these kind of cards here, you know? So it's something that I always keep in mind when looking at lore. The writers are very much keeping in mind, not only are we making a story, but we're also making a story because we're going to have people who are going to look through this stuff and they want to find it. So we are leaving them clues. This is a paper trail. It's not someone who's trying to cover their tracks at all. So always assume in some of these cases that there's a logical conclusion to this. Which, maybe it's the case that all these crossing threads, they do actually mean, yeah, this is the most likely implication. And you're correct. It's not just a coincidence. That's at least my theory on it.
I agree.
I'm sorry. I'm getting distracted by chat. They've given Bife a new nickname.
That was as anything has been put to me ever.
But
you are now.
I look once again back to I checked them on cells.
Right. Yeah.
And you look to where Zivarath, because we know this card was written by her, and she says, "Oryx, I will have the gift mass to feast on. I will have it first. I am Zivarath, and all war is my temple. Beware the daughters of Oryx, for they make and unmake with ease." And then she goes to Savathun and says, "The deceitful sister will be distracted by Arcana and the Song of the Black Hole. Treat her broods with contempt." And it just seems like she's like, okay, I love my siblings, but at the same time, if I can murder them, I will. Let's look out for this, and let's look out for this, and see what happens.
Does anyone else read Savathun jumping into the black hole as a temper tantrum?
I read it as kind of that.
I can't help but read it like, you know what? I'm getting my ball and I'm going home. I just can't. Every time I read it, I'm like, that's totally
play fair. That's what's kind of terrifying about it, though, right?
Yeah, no, it is.
We kill Oryx, and we're like, yeah, we killed the Taken King. And it's like, his siblings are still out there somewhere, but we killed the Taken King. That's good, right? And in the meantime, it's like, there's a vacant hive throne, 2 potential people that could come in and join that. We don't know who Nokris is. We don't know whether the Worm Gods could occupy.
We know where Nokris is. Like, we know where Nokris is.
This is bad. For all we know, Toland.
Savathun
In fact, Toland wants that spot too. It's like, there is a huge gap there. Problems.
Bife, I have said on numerous occasions that a raid boss could be Toland ascended, and it would be horrifying. It would be absolutely horrifying.
Oh,
that's what, it even says at the end of the King's Fall Grimoire card. Sorry, this is totally a tangent by this point, but it says that I think it's the Oryx defeated, or I can't remember the exact naming of it, but in both of those Grimoire cards, you literally have this amazing line from Toland where he essentially says, you're about to kill a god. If there's a vacancy, please do let me know. And then after you kill him, he basically says,
"What are you doing?
There's a vacancy." And it's like, let's hear it is. So he says, it is Oryx himself in the heart of the dreadnought that armors and encapsulates his throne world that you must make your last and surest argument to. Good luck, do let me know if a vacancy opens. And in the next card where it says Oryx defeated, he says, all right, enough, a vacancy has opened, hasn't it? It's just like, oh my gosh. You want to be the god of the hive, you dirty, corrupted warlock, but I kind of love you. That's the greatest piece of lore for me. Oh god, it's so good.
Yeah. I think Toland lore is going to go in some interesting places going forward.
Oh, absolutely. Toland, being in the Ascendant Plane for the Hive, which we know being the race that embraces the darkness the most, so far it seems. Toland is gonna be a big player, going forward. And I think it's going to be the same thing too, though. For I don't think Kabir's dead, but that's another story for another time.
Let's talk about the worm gods.
Let's.
So, physical description. We don't have we kind of have more. It's really weird. We have more than we have for the Ahamkara, but we have less. It's a really weird juxtaposition. We have so much artifacts and armor pieces and grimoire references to the Ahamkara, but we actually have a direct quote that kind of gives us the description of what at least one of the worm gods, Yule, looks like.
It's descriptively much less, but in terms of its pure quantity, it's more.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. Ugh.
And so the way, and this is really, really early on, actually, in the Books of Sorrow. It's the bargain, which is the 9th calcified fragment. They're described as having a vast displacement with great and coiling length and folded jaws, which I'll get to in just a second, along with curled wings, which I'll also get to. First off, folded jaws makes no sense because I spent 2 days trying to picture what this thing meant, and we kind of all agreed in the chat that it's basically, I'm going to butcher this word, but it's the pharyngeal jaw in the sense of a scale worm, which is a parasitic worm, and it looks absolutely terrifying. Just search scale worm jaw, and it looks like a dune worm from Dune, the sandworms. And it looks like you took one of those and you mashed it up with the space slugs from Star Wars, and
It's the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah, no, split jaws. Bell just asked split jaws. Split jaws is more like the Singhili from. Yes, there. Bife just threw a.
Yes,
it's terrifying. But here's the problem: is with that image, I cannot picture that head on a dragon, not a Western dragon.
Oh,
maybe an Eastern dragon, or an Eastern variation. We're not. Are we going to? Okay, before I let Justin go crazy on this one, curled wings. Curled wings is actually a insectoid. I don't think it's just insectoids, but it's predominantly an insectoid mutation on most. I think they're fruit flies, I want to say. But it's literally where the wing, it's most time, wings on insects are flat. There's actually a mutation that literally, it's exactly what it sounds like. It curls the wing. They can still fly, but it's not as productive flight as they usually can. And it looks really weird. I'll throw it up in the chat. Not that that'll help anybody on the podcast, but it's an interesting. That's the
no. When I hear the term curled wings, I think they're underdeveloped from being in the deep.
Right, and I think that's where we've kind of had the only reason I found that image was I literally Googled curled wings, and that's actually the first thing that popped up. I was like, no, that actually kind of makes sense because if it was underdeveloped, wouldn't you be more withered?
Well,
it seems more to me that this is where Yule is trying to say, hey, I'm a badass. It says, I am Yule, the honest worm. Behold my passage. Behold my vast displacement. My ponderous strength. My great and coiling length. My folded jaws and curled wings. Behold the hiving city symbiotic with my flesh. I am Fusen, Oresh. I am the beginning and end of lives. Behold Ir and Zol and and Akka, the virtuous worms. Look upon us and know that we are good / God. Is pretty much what they were telling them is they are gods. Which, you look at that and you're like, holy crap, dude.
I just wanted to break in real quick, and he calls himself fecund. Fecundity is actually the reproductive rate of an organism or population measured in the number of eggs or a seed set. So that kind of ties in with him saying his flesh is like infested with his symbiotic.
Well, he says cities.
Civilizations.
He says cities are growing on him and are embedded inside of him.
And that's terrifying in and of itself, but
because it wasn't scary enough.
Size is one thing you then have to consider, and you sort of think to yourself, huh.
Well, and I guess, but I mean, and here's the other fun part that I keep struggling with is, so Orash and her sisters at this point, we know are called the Krill. Is that indicative of their physical size, or is that just, the timid truth? And, there's the giant argument there too. I mean, if you think about it, think about a krill, it's itty bitty. And so to them, a human would be immense. But, it's all a matter of perspective. I mean, it's the same argument about, they only live 10 years. Yeah, well, what is 10 years? Is 10 years to them 10 years in Earth years? Like, what? And so there's that argument too. So, and I kind of struggle with that because and we keep kind of nodding to this too, is we have armor from the Ahamkara, and Ahamkara we're always, these are big dragons. But then we have armor like the skull, which I almost want to argue the skull is actually different pieces of a skull, not actually just a full skull, because if you actually look at it
with you,
it doesn't, like, I don't understand it. If that was an actual skull, it doesn't make any sense. I don't understand where the jawbone is. Like, I see a jawbone.
It's like, that's the thing for me. When it says folded jaws and whatnot, I do sort of go with that kind of split jaw interpretation that Bell was talking about earlier in the chat. For me, it's definitely the case that it's been reworked and totally misshapen so that it can be a helmet, because apparently warlocks love to decimate our Ahamkara heads for some reason. Point is, it's definitely, if you just look at the straight up biology, I don't think those jaws were split unnaturally. I feel as though it's definitely the case that on their underside, you don't have a connection on their jaw. So, that does still sort of fit with even just the image that you bring up of the kind of the hydrothermal worm, where, if you take a look at one of the images that you linked, there is a separation down the very center of the jaw. So if you can just imagine that for a second as a dragon, it doesn't necessarily have to be kind of sort of a mutually exclusive thing in one's imagination. And, that's me going out and saying, hey, push the spinfoil boat out a little bit more. But, like, this is the thing about describing any of this nonsense. We literally don't have images. Like, in all of this, we have to interpret. So I think they are. Like, they surely have jaws like that. That's something I think, at least. I don't know.
Right.
The thing that strikes me is if you look at the teeth on the skull of Dire Ahamkara, there's a fang in the front, like an incisor of some sort, and then there's like 4 molars, like almost like it's a herbivore or an omnivore. Like, those are not dragon teeth. And the idea that you could take a dragon's skull bones and make a perfect warlock helmet out of it is a little bit ridiculous. I think these are pieces of the dragon's bones of his skull that have been pieced together on a warlock helm so that a warlock could wear it. I think it's probably the parietal bone and then two of the jaw bones on the sides.
But so going back to the folded jaw concept of being I just went blank on my term, a pharyngeal jaw. If you look, okay, so I just posted a picture, a really close up picture of the skull in chat. But if you look at that particular picture, right, where the visor is on the Dire Ahamkara skull, that would be where, if that was a pharyngeal jaw, that would be where that jaw would be. So you could make an argument that that's actually not a restructured skull. That is actually the skull. And the pharyngeal jaw is actually just not present. If you're going to go with the Ahamkara are the same as the worms, right? Because, if you look at the scale worm picture,
it doesn't look too dissimilar. You're right.
I see it. And at the same time, you look at it, and it does look a lot like a typical warlock helmet, just made out of skulls, a skull. But yeah, I definitely see that. That is actually
This is the thing, right?
skull of the dire Ahamkara. And
I think that it's not, and there's a reason for that, which is if you go ahead and take a look at the young Ahamkara's spine, you can see that it's got the kind of upper jaw of what is evidently a much younger Ahamkara on it. And that thing, it also has the jaws underneath, which the bottom jaw is separated. The top jaw, though, it looks kind of different. Like, I'm going to try and find an image of that's kind of not the one exotic, like, square icon. But basically with that, you see something which, it doesn't just have molars and whatnot. It's very clear that on the Warlock one, it's been, like, sanded down, because, it's a helmet or something. But on the Hunter arm piece, you see actual teeth. You see a nasty-looking jaw there. And even though it's young, you can see some sort of interesting traits there, that it's not necessarily I cannot remember the term for that jaw. You are using crazy vernacular there to describe this stuff, Blue, but
the pharyngeal?
The pharyngeal jaw. It may not necessarily be the same thing.
Oh, I see what you're talking about. Yeah. No, I see it. Yep.
And again, that's the thing, because we don't know how these things develop over time or anything like that. So the difference between a young and a dire Ahamkara is, who knows, but at the very least, there's that one unifying piece of biology, is you can see the two jaws on the underside, both on the arm and the headpiece that you get as a Warlock.
Right.
So that's one thing that you take just by looking directly at it, but at the same time, again, we don't know how these things develop. So, I don't know. All spin foil. Yay.
Well,
Yeah.
nope, go for it.
No, I was going to say we're working on a disclaimer that's built out of the Atheon times conflict.
Oh God, yeah, we
to
are.
understand. Well, the card says to understand Atheon is to accept certain limitations, and these limitations are that we don't even know the terms.
The quote is, "We are ill-equipped to understand an entity that defies simple causality. Let us accept these limitations and proceed."
And replace Atheon with the word grimoire, and then you've got our mission statement.
Damn. Replace causality
short,
with
pretty
plain
much.
logic and English. I don't know. God. Damn. That's what I kind of do despise a little bit about the Grimoire. I'm like, I understand that this is great, and the Flower language means we get so many great etymological references. Like, we wouldn't know anything about Yule and the Yuletide and the whole spinfoil we went down with Blue's notes earlier, but sometimes don't you just wish it was all in plain English?
No.
So,
I'm going to be honest.
That would take all the fun.
I would take,
out of it.
yeah, exactly. There goes my entire Wednesday night.
That's one of the things that I love about the lore is there's just so much spin foil you can put on it. And you don't know if you're right or wrong, but it's very, very fun. For me, at least, to just...
I usually know I'm right, but...
No, Justin's not
Lord.
right, ever.
Good Lord.
Not even if there's a fire.
Well, before we jump fully into spin metal mode, there is one last point on the biology of the worms that we know, and that is, okay, this is another one that it's kind of a division. There are some people who say this isn't worms. There are some people who say it is worms. But the new Ghost Fragment Ocean Storms 2, I read as saying, hey, look, they're worms with bones and scales and teeth and all this stuff. There are some there, and you can read it one way or the other depending on how you read the contextual structure of the card. Let me actually just go ahead and read it.
Yeah, that's Ocean
of Storms 2. It says, last known records from Lunar Station First Light. The tunnels were geological in nature, or had to be. That's what we thought until 12 hours into the second sublunar expedition when we found the bones. A single long rib cage, the size of an aircraft fuselage. The living creatures themselves, we found 100 meters down. They might have been worms, if worms had scales and teeth and moved more quickly than a man could run. June died first, then Luli. Bad deaths. Deaths not worth thinking about, and so I don't, as I wander these tunnels, lost, waiting to run out of oxygen. Will it hurt, I wonder? That final sleep when it comes? The sleep that isn't sleep? But then everything on the moon is named for what it's not. Have you not noticed? The sea of serenity, oceans of storms, the sea of rains. It's only fitting. In the tunnels, though, we found things that were exactly what they were, and so I named them thus. Mark them well if this recording is found. The circle of bones, the chamber of night. One does not walk amid these dark tunnels and not lose something. They say that to look out upon the ocean is to feel small, but to walk in these caverns is to feel your grasp on reality slipping. There is no returning to what you were before, a believer of science and the fundamental rationality of the universe, not after seeing those worms. But here now, at the bottom, I have found the other side of the nightmare. Like waking from a dream only to realize you were still asleep. Perhaps my oxygen is getting low. Yes, I can see it is. Hypoxia already setting in. The thing before me is like myself, partly alive and partly not. An ossified afterbirth. A pulsating tumor. It lays in a crater of its own making, dark and jagged. So here I'll sit and lay me down. I see a doorway, and within, the death-white egg cases of nightmares yet to come. And glad I am to miss it. I read that as, hey, we just got eaten by worms. And facehuggers are confirmed, because I can't help but read the last paragraph, or the second to last paragraph, as the birthing chamber from an Aliens movie. So I call this the Aliens card. That's what I refer to it as.
Well, that comes back down to as well, like the worm gods. You'll just so happen to know where the needle ship was, which I think is important. The gods, that's one of the things. We have a half hour left, so we might as well get into spinfoil.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
The gods, to me, it seemed like, because the Leviathan says somewhere along the lines of, this is what I want, what the traveler wants. Speaking about fundament, which is where we all know the worm gods thus far have originated, which I'm sure they're originated elsewhere. But
right, I was about to say, that's where we first encounter them. I would argue that they weren't originally from Fundament.
Oh, absolutely not. And I think that's proven through when they found the needle ship.
Right.
Like,
and the
it
continents.
already had a breeding room. It already had monstrosities throughout it, which, you would think about that as ogres, but this is before the hive were the hive, so this was another species, to me personally, that embraced the worms, took their offer, and went ahead and ran with it. And when they realized they were going to lose, for me personally, it seems like, okay, this is going to happen. This is where all the light is gathering, so let's go ahead and go here. And so my personal belief is that
they crashed the ship into Fundament to,
as a last resort.
Yeah, like the Sun Crusher in Star Wars. Just throw it in Bespin.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead and crash it in here. We'll go ahead. We'll gather power here, and we will find another suitable species, which so happen to be the Krill people, which we now know is a hive.
I also want to point out that the continents on Fundament, I totally still think are pieces of the ship.
Are we back on that?
Yeah, we totally are back on that, because it's true.
Yeah.
It took some time, but we got there.
We got there. Only took 6 episodes.
Yeah, it's been in my head for a long time, okay?
Which, it very well could be. But you look at the fact that Teo, she was the only one who knew how to build engines. This was so important that she felt like this was a bargaining chip with the, not the Ammonites, but the,
Yeah, wasn't it the Ammonites?
Well,
No,
the Ammonites and then the
It
Ecumen.
was the helium drinkers.
Yeah. No, you're talking about the
helium
first
core.
picture. Yeah.
That's where she felt, she needed to go to.
Well, and it's just, I mean, we kind of mentioned that in the Books of Sorrow, too. It was just kind of poetically sad. I don't even know what the term would be for it, but it was a self-fulfilling prophecy that she created. She created the hive, basically, by making the decision that, oh yeah, they're not worthy of leading us. She actually created better emperors than she could have ever hoped for their court, the Osmian court. They not only took over the Osmian court, they took over 2% of the race as a fundament, slaughtered billions or quadrillions of people, and yeah. So she made them into the perfect emperor, I guess, or dictator, depending on triumvirate, whatever you want to call them, by making the decision that they weren't ready to be leaders. She made them into leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. And Savathun, I feel like we're definitely going to run into her later on because we definitely haven't killed her yet.
I feel likewise.
And
I didn't know what to say there, but I agree.
There's no way we're done.
I absolutely agree on everything.
Yes.
As long as the
except for-
Osmium court has a vacancy all the way up at the top, there's going to be someone trying to get in.
Yeah, and Bife, that's an interesting concept, is the fact that there's a vacancy.
I mean, think about it, right?
Exactly.
It's a case of you have someone all the way up the top who is collecting tribute. And now you all of a sudden have this thing of, well, either it's just a power struggle through the lower ranks below Oryx, and so, maybe there's a very high up ascendant hive, possibly someone who would have been just below the court of Oryx, who was also, somehow managed to avoid the slaughter of the court as well, who is then capable of ascending and controlling all these hive. That's why the Darkblade is such a problem, because they are one of those individuals that has that power. And, without any individual to sort of hold this instead, status quo changes.
He's supposed to be Varrock's love interest, which...
Ew.
I mean...
No,
you look
it kind
at
of makes you feel like
we don't even know
just had
who the
really
mother
bad
spawn
timing.
is for Crota. Oryx was like, I found a suitable mother, and I made children. And he left it at that. He didn't say, oh, her name was this, her name was that. And sure, it could have been Ogris. We can't leave that out because reasons.
Well, we could have.
Yeah.
You didn't.
There's the mommy. It's Omnical, isn't it? I knew it.
See, that's the thing is, we have no freaking clue who Nokris is right now.
Yeah, actually, I'm interested to
Don't
see
get me started on this one.
how Bife has come across Nokris in the lore, just his impression of just the name.
Really, 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 really dumb idea. That partly comes up through the strangest of interactions that I've had with Destiny's sort of additional features that you can get for it. In the soundtrack that you can buy for The Taken King, there's actually a soundtrack near the very end that says something to the effect of Two Sons. Let me go ahead and just pull that up and get the exact name of it. This got me thinking the minute that I looked at the whole Nokris grimoire, and I was like, okay, come on, surely it can't be that simple. Oh yeah, no, it says father and sons, plural. Not son, sons. And it's notable that Oryx has one son, two daughters, as far as we know. Having said that, he also is known to take on foster sons. So the Darkblade is one example of this. He literally calls him a foster son in the grimoire card for the Darkblade. And that makes me wonder, is Nokris something to do with that? Is Nokris some kind of secret son that we didn't really know about, who is just another one of the Fosters that happen to be so high up in the Ascendant chain that maybe they're the next one? And, it makes some sense that they wouldn't have been mentioned because the Foster Sons are a relatively new breed of hive. So they wouldn't necessarily be mentioned in the Book of Sorrows. You then have to also consider that if they're featured right next to Oryx, as they're obviously done on the massive wall prior to killing him in his corporeal form, they're obviously holding some significance, but they're flanking Crota. It's not a case where you have that being, some kind of thing where it's a dedication to, Death Singer names are evading me. Crota's two sisters. Why is it? Anak, yeah. But, for me, that is a potential answer. What if it is a second son of Oryx?
What if, can I, you want me to piss off a lot of people?
Go for
Do it. Fight.
So, okay. I'm going to get yelled at so hard about this.
Here we go. It's pain.
What? No, actually even worse. Well, I can go full, you want me to go full spin metal? I have a random theory that Nokris is the speaker, but we'll get into that later. But
okay.
No, it's not. It's my pay-in version.
That's your pay-in as a person.
But no, like
Speaking
one of the
which,
things.
How much do you feel that pay-in may actually be a person?
Don't break his
Give me
heart.
at least a one. Give me at least
You're
a one.
saying I've got a shot.
Well, how long is a piece of string? I mean, chance is always there, but it's this may be a bit of a short piece of string. I don't know.
But there's a string. Latch onto that, Willie. There's a string.
I admit that it's within the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
But I think by this point, it's so outlandish that there's probably not going to happen.
Bife, I don't want to make you feel bad, but I want you to know that you just told Tiny Tim there's...
So basically, I'm Scrooge now. I'm going to go ahead and say it. Believe.
Believe.
Full X factor on that thing, and when it turns out that Pian was Saint 14's best friend, you will come back to us and be like, I told you.
Even though one of the models of
Lord,
the Destiny lore community has said pretty much he doesn't believe. I still believe Payan as a person. There you go.
Stand firm. Stand firm in your faith.
That's right. Damn it.
Always take an alternative opinion. Like, all jokes aside, that's the way that Mavericks are the ones that advance society, not the mainstream thinkers. If it wasn't for Galileo and the fact that he was constantly being attacked back in his day and age, we would never have taken note of his theories, and then we'd never know about all the theories that he actually turned out to be correct about.
What? We're totally in a heliocentric universe. I don't know what you're talking about.
So Will...
Uh-oh.
Just math-wise.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Indeed. Everything of what you say.
There's a well, if you're dealing with the multiverse theory, technically speaking. No, so like one of the things that we kind of were throwing around was the fact that Nokris is not mentioned anywhere. This is kind of a really interesting thing. The only thing that we have of Nokris is, I think, the statue off the top of my head. And it's interesting to me because we know the Hive are pretty good about keeping records on everything, including their own embarrassments. So it would be rather telling that they just straight up erased something. And we know hang on. I'm not even into the fun part yet. We know that... Oh, good Lord. The chat just... Okay, we know that... So take Dregden Yor. We know that a Guardian can fall to the darkness, right? Can a Hive come to the light? What would be so
fantastic question.
What would be such a travesty that even the Hive, which they've documented, their own mistakes and I was stupid, blah blah blah. And but they don't mention him at all that we can find. And so
You're right. It could be, because their entire society is basically one massive worship of the sword logic. What if there's a hive that goes and says,
screw you.
You can be free and forget about the entire fight to exist. You can do what you want.
Right, and we know that Oryx played with that idea, because in, I think it's Worm Food, he mentions that there are other paths. You make your path, you break it, you eat it, and you make your path again. And we know that Savathun, or I think it was Savathun, that when she decided to take her ball and go home, she made a comment of, I'm going to go find, there might be a different way. Then there's the conversation about when he gives Savathun Qoria, you know, she kind of has that, they have that short little conversation about, you know, what, are we on the right, did we do the right thing, and all that. I mean, there's been a number of times in the book, but I mean, even in the books of Sorrow, that, I mean, that to me, that just kind of is like, okay, so even they document their questioning. And granted, if you read the books of Sorrow as a theological text for the Hive, which basically it is, that questioning of faith, of their faith, would, you know, ultimately lead to a stronger faith, which is what it does. But I mean, so it's telling that he's not even in there, like not even in the books of Sorrow. And we know that we're and to be clear, there are books of Sorrows that we have not seen yet. There is, I think it's Thorn that mentions the seventh or 13th book of Sorrow. Or is it 7th or 13th? I can't remember. There's it.
Let me check. I actually have my inventory open right now.
They have
I think it's the 13th Understanding, 7th Book of Sorrows. I'm
right.
Pretty sure. Damn it. Wait. Yeah, 13th Understanding, 7th Book of Sorrow. To rend one's enemies is to see them not as equals, but objects hollow of spirit and meaning. So there's more. Definitely more.
Right. And so, I mean, it's entirely plausible that we get a book and it's like, oh, hey, these are the adventures of the prodigal son Nokris. You know, he's coming back. Yay, there's much rejoicing. More Eversion Day celebrations.
No,
by the way, Nokris raid.
Just
for that to blow more.
Everyone loves to flame Bungie for their storytelling in this thing, but really, how genius is this? They have set up a universe where they can do anything at any time, however and whenever they want.
My only problem with Bungie on storytelling is the fact that they haven't given me a book to read yet.
Yeah, well,
give me, please,
one. Because honestly,
I'll give you that. But I'm just saying they've pretty much. They've set up a universe where they could literally do whatever they want, and no one can really argue against it. Bungie.
So do you guys mind if I jump in with a little weird spin metal that pertains to Netherverses?
We haven't already. Oh yes, go.
But also is like, hey, this is why the Ahamkara can control minds. Because this is the spin metal that I've cooked up for literally months, and at some point I'm just going to do a massive video being like, yo, this is my dumb theory. Watch this hour-long video and call me an idiot in the comment section. But
I can use that as a segue for my really, really funny segue, or my funny spin foil theory of demonic possessions. So go. So
basically, my thought is that we visited the Hive Netherworlds, right? And we know that at a certain point, the Vex basically spilled out into the gate system, from the gate system into, you know, Oryx's world, his throne world. That, you know, it means that it can't just be these purely self-contained universes that the Hive occupy while they're in the Netherverse. The Netherverse has to be something bigger than just that. So with that idea in mind of the Netherverse being this way, way, way larger kind of thing that individuals tap into, you then have to ask yourself, like, okay, what are the elements behind this? And you then can come to this realization that there are two elements to both of the universes that we can just sort of dumb down. In our universe, it's what I'd call materium dominant, and that basically means that physical actions, you know, they are more often than not the ones that are determining processes. So for us, it's physics, it's chemistry, it's biology. And those are the things that are determining what happens in our world, the erosion of the sands of time, etc. Things that will happen are purely determined by that. And there is a small psychic undercurrent. And that's the kind of thing that Guardians, for example, can tap into. And this can manifest itself in the light and the dark. In the Netherverse, that's flipped. Because you see that in, the example of Crota's Oversoul Throne, it's literally described as a world created by his own will. And that flips the paradigm from materium dominant to psycho dominant. And you have this world that is no longer mutable in terms of physics, but is psychomutable. You can literally edit the world as you wish with your own will. And survival there is not a case of physically avoiding harm. It's a case of proving that you're powerful enough to go ahead and will yourself through existence. And that's kind of why I think not only is Toland still alive, and there's a whole bunch of other things you could relate to this, but also I feel as though the Ahamkara have possession over us, even when they're just bones, because their presence is made up of such a strong will that they're capable of reaching us from within the psychoverse, the netherverse, basically. And so, again, crazy theory, but it does explain a few things as to why we're able to, relate not just the Ahamkara to the worm gods, possibly, because, then it makes a little more sense. There is a small connection between the hive there. But also, you take a look at some of the other stuff, and more stuff starts to make sense. So, Dredgenyor in particular is someone that he's one of the things running through my mind constantly. And there's always little examples that I could draw on, but for him in particular, there's this one quote from him when he's in the bar, and I believe this is in Palamon. I hope it's in Palamon, because if it's not, I'll be really sad. That breaks continuity of the story. But he says, ever been to Luna? No one's ever been, says someone, and the response is something along the lines of, the bones say otherwise. And with that in mind, it makes you think, so what bones? Is he being influenced by an Ahamkara? If so, maybe they're dead, maybe they're talking from beyond. And it explains one final thing, which is, how the hell did Toland survive Yurt's death singing? It's the case that surely he understands something that he believes to be so pure, the sword logic, right? And he basically sits down and says, if I understand this, I've tapped into the power of the hive, which is the understanding that life is the fight to exist, and simply by knowing that, and dying physically, in the Netherverse, I don't really die, because I have attained something which is so psychically potent that I will be able to keep on going. And that, I think, is part of the reason why we have all these grimoire cards of him not only talking to us and Eris about, oh, hey, this vacancy opened up in, Oryx's throne world. Hey, here's, all the stuff I know, but also him describing how he is spectacularly dead, how he can navigate the universe of the hive, work between all their throne worlds. Spinfoil at its finest, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, the quiddity of death.
Exactly.
Yes. That was really well put.
And there's a million different holes you can poke in this, but the more you keep on thinking about it, there's more that you could slowly go on and explain. So there's also an idea that you could relate to this, which is that these universes move in time differently.
Oh yeah.
So
just look at the Platonic theory of spheres, and imagine that as multiple versions, or as Justin loves pointing out, the Ecumen's radial time time. What do they call it? Why am I not remembering this one?
It's
radial
cyclic,
time.
Yeah, cyclic time model.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's.
Think about it, right? An easier way, I guess, to explain some of this to the chat, and this is how I thought of it initially as a potential theory, is imagine that you're holding your hand out just flat. I guess your entire arm out flat. That's like a vertical line that describes time as it normally flows, right? But then imagine that there's a wiggly line constantly going from peak to trough above and below your arm, right? And imagine that wiggly line is the flow of time within the Netherverse. That all of a sudden explains why time can be different and why the Vex can exploit that for time travel. And if this is connected and true, we know that they do because they've been let in. A cut was made by Crota in Oryx's own netherworld, and the Vex spilled out. Well, who's to say that he didn't break the boundaries between one netherverse and another part of it, and then accidentally goes and tampers with the stream that the Vex are traveling through?
Yeah, and you apply it to right. Well, no, but apply it to the Platonic music of the spheres, the harmony of spheres, right? There's a literal. It's very mathematical, but it's basically you incorporate a metaphysical principle that there are different tones of energy, which, manifests in a number of different manners or different ways. And they all, when combined into the cosmos, they create a harmony, which, most people will call it the harmony of spheres. Some people call it the symphony, but it's a very big thing. And you apply that to a temporal model. And that's exactly what the Ecumen and what you're talking about is it's that radial movement of stuff like everything is working in perfect order, and then you punch a hole in one wall, and all of a sudden
it all falls apart.
It not necessarily falls apart, but it allows a collapse of one sphere maybe into another sphere, and so you have a hybrid sphere, I guess. I don't know. You could even, it could collapse the whole thing. Technically, I would hazard that is a threat, but if you punch too many holes in the wall, Crota's really good at that.
I mean, think about it, right? The reason why we have to stop the Shield Brothers in the end from destroying the power core of the Dreadnought is because the Dreadnought is a paradox. It's literally ripped from it's Oryx's throne world. His ascendant realm literally ripped into a physical space. That it's something that just should not exist, and yet it does.
And just for the record, that's Eversion Day, which we've talked to Mike from Planet Destiny. We have decided that that's March 5th, and everyone needs to wear their underwear on the outside of their clothes because it's backward. Yes. It's inside out. So
but if the police hassle you, wear Superman underwear. Tell them
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
This is the things that our chat come up with when we're bored. But no, I mean, and like I never even thought about the music of spheres to be applied to a temporal model, but that would actually make a lot of sense in a radial design, like a rotational design, and actually it would make perfect sense in the way of a multiverse theory, which we kind of have pointed. We're talking about that right now, about when we're talking war minds, and so we're talking a little bit about time travel with regards to the Exo Stranger. But the concept of the music of spheres is that everything is in perfect harmony. And so in a multiverse model, you would have to have everything in harmony, and in order to breach the wall between each universe, you would have to be able to do it in a way that wouldn't puncture. Of course, this is also all assuming that we're not simulations in some giant Vex mine, but...
I like that one.
This is the thing about it, right? Like, when I first thought up, like, what if this is the case? I thought to myself, nah, surely not. But the crazy thing is that it starts to explain even more little kind of tidbits and things, and the Ahamkara and the way that they can manifest beyond death is just one of the smaller things to it, and this is why... I don't want to say it's true because this is so outlandishly spin-foily that it's like there's undoubtedly elements to this that are, if not wrong, then completely inaccurate. But also, it explains things like why at the very end of the Crota Son of Oryx Grimoire card it says, as such, we do not understand the relation between, the Vexgate system and the Hive Netherworlds. It explains all sorts of stuff like why Cabal Scions literally are described as ghosts, as, throwing their minds around like hammers. There's all this stuff where whenever it basically refers to some kind of powerful entity within the world of Destiny, you can link it in some small way back to, well, how are they impacting the Netherverse? What do they do to the psychomutable spheres? Mm-hmm.
No,
that's again, 100% spin foil here.
And we know that the Ahamkara were guilty of the solipsistic flatteries, which if you know anything about that, which most people probably don't, solipsism is the view or theory that the self is all that can be known to exist. And it's and this kind of ties into something that I'll kind of go into really quickly. It's literally the most egocentrical paradigm at all. Like, literally, you're saying that the only thing that you can prove to exist is yourself, because that's the only thing that you can experientially say is actually there.
It's like
everything
Descartes,
else,
basically.
Yeah,
Ego-ergism.
Exactly.
Is that? It's a long time since. Yeah,
it's basically a kind of think of the popular. Okay, so there's the infamous Schrodinger cat, right? Mm-hmm. If you put the cat in the box, I mean, just on a basic philosophical level, if you put the cat in the box and you close the box, all the philosophical theory says is that you cannot, when you are looking at a closed box, you cannot, in your experience, tell me if that cat is alive or dead. You can tell me what it was when you put it in the box and what you think it is, but you cannot tell me if the cat is alive or dead without observing it.
Yeah.
And in order to observe it, you are casting your perception on that, and therefore you are having a biased view of the paradigm. Now, the interesting thing is the Ahamkara, and this is actually Damo. Damo pointed this out, and it kind of was a giant light bulb on my brain. View the Ahamkara as Mephistopheles from Faust. They're doing Faustian deals with everybody. That's what they are. They are a version of Mephistopheles in Destiny. And the interesting thing is, and I would almost say one of the arguments for why the Great Hunt was instituted, not only was the price too high, but, and chat's going to love me for this, who else was kicked out of the tower for promoting an egocentric view of the world? Well, let's see. Osiris, who
there we go.
Yep, I told him it was going to come, but one of Osiris's biggest crimes was the fact that he was like, "Hey, you know what, Guardians? You don't have to do this. You don't have to protect the city if you don't want to. You can research the darkness, Toland. You can go after the vault, Kabir. You can do whatever you want because that's what you can do." That's what the Ahamkara are doing. They're saying, and I kind of make an argument that the reason why is because one of the theories is the Ahamkara's price for what they gave was light. They wanted our light. Well, if you look back, I think it was the Hunter episode, we kind of got into this. If you look back at the source of a Guardian's light, it ultimately were a conduit for the light that stems from the Traveler. It's not ours. We don't generate light. We are simply a tool through which the Traveler uses to defend itself, ultimately, and at the most basic level. And if you start twisting that, though, and so it's not yours. I can't trade it away because it's not mine. However, if you convince that person that the light is theirs, all of a sudden it's a lot easier to trade away. Because why does the Traveler get to tell you what to do with your stuff? You know? And I mean, I'm going to make the argument too that the worms and the Ahamkara are psychologically, if not necessarily physically, linked, because I'm still on the fence whether or not they're the same, to be honest, but I know they both promote extremely egocentrical paradigms, whereas the Traveler is more of an allocentric paradigm. And so basically, to back up, egocentrical is obviously egocentric. It's you are the center. And allocentric is the exact opposite. It's the other is the center. And we know that the Traveler promotes an allocentric because that's what that's the entire purpose of it. I mean, it pulls societies up. It builds these utopias, and that ultimately will fall, but which is a whole nother debate. But it's a very
4 minutes, Blue.
You can do it. Okay. But my argument is that the worm parasite is actually akin to a demonic possession in the sense that you have themes of pride, egocentrism, falling darkness. You have a formless one that's calling all sorts of shots. And, I mean, at its base, it's a parasitic endosymbiotic relationship, which is, if you're going to describe a demonic possession scientifically, that's what it is. It's a non-mutual symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, it's actually a parasitic conditional endosymbiotic relationship because it doesn't follow the normal rules of nature. It's by nature it's unnatural. Exactly. That's what I'm going at.
And that's an argument we made with the Books of Sorrow.
I will filibuster Chinese dragons at the end of this.
Oh, good Lord.
It's going to happen.
Hey, Willie, did you want to go ahead and sign off real quick?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and give my shout out.
Yeah, go for it.
Bife, thanks for coming on board, dude.
Dude, thank you for hosting me. Seriously.
Dude,
I jump at this opportunity whenever I can.
Be careful.
Yeah.
I've already got chat asking me to get you back on to read cards. So
I don't know about getting back on soon. I need to sleep at some
that's
point.
True.
But reading cards and
Bife,
sending them over is not out of the question.
You're a legend.
You're a tiger man with a sultry voice. Didn't you know this?
That's right.
Indeed.
It's already been tweeted.
Oh my god.
But Bife, thank you so much for coming on board. Amazing to have you in the chat tonight. Of course, Foxtrot, shout out, because that's where I'm at. Dad's a Destiny Foxtrot. Started out in Charlie. And just want to say, once again, thanks, Bife, for coming on board, talking more with us.
We calls need not thank each other. We've frankly come together.
It's been a blast, though.
Situation. So, dude, don't worry about it. I'm happy to be here.
Dude, it's been a blast, though. Like, just everybody speaking their own opinions on what's going on here. We'll find out eventually what the exact connection is between the Ahamkara and the worms gods are. But as for now, it's just been incredible. So thanks for being on here. And on that, I am going to have to say goodnight.
All right.
See you, Willie. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
And back to demonic possessions.
Hey.
So, but another really fun note on this is, so if you start looking at the deal that the worms made with the krill, there was it's a really interesting couple turns of phrase, and one of them is that they are all of a sudden called princes. And they're talking about how they need to view Yule as his body as sacrament. Which to me is just interesting to begin with, because they had to dive into the deep, the dark, and they're talking to something who stood before a formless one to get their power, which, I mean, I'm sorry, they kind of screams a little bit of dark magic there. But hang on real quick, but the other thing is, what's really interesting is, so that made me start thinking. I was like, okay, well, let's look into this a little bit more, and it's going to get really fun. Because what happens is the worm gods push a bargain on the krill, which emphasizes the following of the host's nature, which is really interesting because if you think about it, they had the ability to say, you need to do this instead of this, but instead their one condition was, hey, be a host and let our offspring live inside you with a endosymbiotic relationship, but also follow your nature. Follow your nature, not our nature, your nature. And it was just a very interesting, and to be completely frank, there's not a one-to-one connection between any of the worms and any of the grimoire, the demonology grimoires that I'm aware of, which, don't ask me, it's a long story. But there are, and of course, as I started doing more digging into these grimoires, there's a really interesting connection with Leviathan and the fallen seraphim, which in Christian terms, a seraphim is the highest order of angels. It's the same order of angels that you would see Lucifer, Asmodeus, most of the high, what's usually called the high demonic princes. Yeah. Leviathan is one of those.
It's a warrior class, isn't it?
Yes, it's the generals of the angelic armies. And Leviathan is actually mentioned in a couple of different classifications as the prince of the sin of envy. And he, or even the person who tempts people into heresy, and was actually the opposite of St. Peter in the Catholic Church. And that was from the Michaelis classification of demons, which was around 1613. And then in the Binesfield's classification, Leviathan was the prince of the sin of envy, and that was in 1589, so actually it was before the Michaelis. But there is a number of different references to Leviathan, which is an interesting juxtaposition to the Leviathan that we know, because the Leviathan that we know actually tries to prevent them from getting to the worms. So it was just a really interesting tidbit, and you want to talk about a wormhole that keeps going. But I won't bore people with it. But also the other thing is, as we kind of mentioned at the beginning of this chat, there's a Vedic connection, and that is to the Ahamkara's name as well as the Traveler. Now, it's really, really interesting here because the Vedic philosophy is a philosophy that teaches that when one's mind is in a state of Ahamkara, one is in a state of subjective illusion where the mind has bound the concept of oneself with an external thing. That thing can be a tangible material object, or it can be a concept, such as a concept for the fighting of peace. The ego is involved in constructing the illusion. And that was just a really rough wiki search, so don't 100% quote me on that. It's Wikipedia's, infamous for not being entirely correct. But a point that was made by, and I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, a point that was made on Reddit by a user called Snoop Rocket, and he actually made a really good point, was that it could be that the Ahamkara are reification of the Vedic concept of the same name, to selfishly see power and knowledge from an external source, driven by hope, vengeance, and despair, and these qualities are of an ego-driven self. He believes that the Ahamkara feed off our egos while being a metaphor for our egos themselves, and will exist so long as we leave ourselves unchecked. While he's unsure of the connection between the worms and the Ahamkara, he thinks that the Books of Sorrow is a great parable for the self-destruction that follows when one falls deep into the ego trap, and how we negatively affect those around us when we let this happen. So that was just a really, really, really interesting connection. And Unisys brings up the excellent point that, and Unisys is pretty infamous for doing a lot of weapon lore over in the Destiny lore Reddit.
He's the item man.
He is amazing at it. But a lot of the weapons refer to Hades as well, which is very interesting. So that's my crazy fun headache of the week.
Brings us back to those words, it feeds off someone's ego, but look at what the Warlock says at the very end of that Grimoire card.
Pride.
Why did I do that? What moved me to such pride? It's kind of spot on in that sense.
And then I think Justin's teasing the idea of whether or not he's going to...
I'm not teasing.
Oh, God, here he goes.
It's confirmed. You know what? Live?
Here we go.
You know what? When
I'm keen.
Are you good? You good for a sec?
I'm good. Let's do this.
You have your nether verse. Justin has his
band first started. It was just like 10 people or so, and I think it was actually just a DoD thing at that point. And I was like a deer in the headlights. Everything I read, it was, I was so new to it all. And I started looking for like real world connections and things. So eventually when I read the Ghost Fragment Vex cards about the Ishtar Collective with the 227 copies, I said, man, that's a really specific number. I've got to check into that. There's some numerology thing there at work. I spent an entire week running 227 through every type of process I could possibly manage. I don't know how it happened, but somehow I ended up on the number 9. And
what?
I stumbled.
And for the record, he's not joking, at all. Wait, it gets so much better.
Continue.
I stumbled onto the number 9, and it didn't help me out at all with my Ishtar Collective problems. It didn't help me at all, which was what we were chatting about at the time. And because I think the first one we ever did was The Stranger, and it was all Ishtar Collective and, all that stuff. And I was like, this is not helpful at all, but the number 9 is intrinsically linked to dragons. And I'll jump straight in.
How, if you don't mind, explain the intrinsic link to dragons, unless that's exactly what you're about to do.
He's about to.
Oh,
okay,
I'm
being
on
genius.
my
I'm
way.
sorry. Go for it.
This is awesome.
This is first of all, this is a personal dream of mine to explain my Chinese dragon theory to you.
Go for it.
Yeah, so in China, the number 9 is revered almost supernaturally. It's much like our, base 10 number system. It's the highest single number that can be achieved. And they put a lot of symbolism on that. And it's also really prevalent in Chinese mythology. And specifically, it's linked to the Chinese dragon. The Chinese dragon's always described in terms of 9 different attributes, which is really crazy. And it just gets crazier from here. The nine different attributes are it has 117 scales, 81 yang, 36 yin, and all these numbers are actually multiples of 9. 9 times 9 times 9 is 81. 9 times 4 is 36.
13 times 9 is 117.
Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
what number was that?
117.
Mm-hmm.
And here's before I go any farther and just spin foil I'm sorry, Blue, the shit out of this thing.
Someone put that on a shirt.
Yes.
Oh.
So we need a shirt like that, dude.
I'd write
We do
this
need
down.
a shirt. Let's spin foil the shit out of this thing. Bungie's magic number's been 7 up to this point. Why 9? Like, why all of a sudden 9? 9 seems to be a pretty important number in Destiny. So, that really struck me. Now, it gets even better. There's actually 9 sons of the Dragon King, which that whole plot line actually it really intrigued me. So all these little parallels kind of shot me in the direction of the 9 actually being comprised of Ahamkara. And if you actually look at the Ghost Fragment Legends 2 card, which is the infamous contradicting 9 card. Yeah. A couple of the descriptions are vaguely, and when I say vaguely, I mean really vaguely, directed in the overall direction of it being some sort of beast. And just one second. I didn't think I'd ever get this chance. So,
for example,
Justin's like in shock.
Yeah,
so
read it, Blythe. Yeah.
So I'm thinking in particular that you're thinking of the 9 are ancient Leviathan intelligences from the seas of Europa or the hydrocarbon pits of Titan, for example. Oh gosh, which of these is also appropriate? I think the first one, survivors of the Cisjovian colonies made compact with alien force to ensure their own survival.
Oh, kind of like Dragon Wishes?
Yeah,
exactly.
And also,
it's like
also one that not a lot of people, because believe me, like lore band's been around since what, Blue?
September.
This theory's been thrown around and poo-pooed a couple times now.
I would never, ever do... Yeah, I would.
And it's actually gotten to a point to where I'm not even allowed to post it in general chat. I actually have to PM people. I'm like, so have you seen my dragon theory? And they'll be like,
oh God, run away.
PM. Yeah. But the one that everyone overlooks, is the 9 are a viral language of pure meaning. Does that not speak to the Ahamkara kind of a hallucinogenic, or I don't even know if you want to say hallucinogenic, but the the persuasive power that even the bones have over the bearers? I mean, that I don't know, man. This has been. I've got like newspaper clippings on my wall with pieces of yarn going across. from wall to wall. And this is like it all converges in the center, and this is the confluence of that.
You know, we joke about that, but legit, that's the reason I bought the blackboard.
I was about to say, did you not see his blackboard with Saint 14?
For the sake of lore, and like
that was epic.
I kid you not. Like on one side of it, I'm always planning whatever the new lore episode is, but on the other side, I have a constantly building thing of the Netherverse. Like that's the reason I have it, because every single time when the theory like this, exactly like your one, comes up, it's like I think to myself like, I need to add this in. This is another piece to the puzzle. And dude, think about it. Like, there's links that you could make back to the Hive with the very last of these. The 9 are shadows left by the annihilation of a transcendent shape burned into the weft of what was. Think about this, right? Oryx, and by the time he becomes the Taken King, he knows the darkness and its true meaning, and he's obsessed with this idea of the perfect shape. In order to get to the darkness, he has to destroy Akka, who is, you know, one of the only other beings that has ever communed with the deep and has ever really received this knowledge. You know, the 9 are shadows left by the annihilation of a transcendent shape, burned into the weft of what was. Some, you know, if we are going to, you know, sort of conflate worm gods and Ahamkara and all this other stuff, then maybe, just maybe that's another hint. I don't know. Full spin foil.
Oh, this is, I told you.
This is some of the most beautiful spin foil, though.
It's 10.5 on the spinfoil scale. This is where this lies.
10.5 out of PN.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's a 9. It's a 9 on the scale.
Oh,
Get it right.
That's true. That's true.
No, but that's my piece. I've just said it. If I didn't get that out, I wouldn't be able to sleep tonight. So,
dude, it's fascinating. This is why I want more on the freaking 9. Come on.
Oh God!
Fragment Legends 9-2, please.
Oh my God, please.
Just not fair.
So, does that wrap it up, Blue?
Yeah. Do you want to? Well, let's give our guest first dibs on. Well, not first dibs, since Willie kind of did that already. But I assume that most people know where to find you. If they don't, they're just they're probably over on ishtarcollective.net. So,
well, I mean, YouTube, Twitter, you guys probably know my thing, at Inside Destiny on Twitter. My name is Bife on YouTube. I think my real shout out for this episode does have to go to Ishtar Collective, though, because my God, ishtarcollective.net is my favorite site now.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna do this right now. 2 seconds. ishtarcollective.net.
They're on Twitter.
The favorites.
They're on Twitter as well, at Ishtar COLL.
You're welcome, Ishtar.
Yeah, they just got on Twitter a couple weeks ago, I believe.
In that
just
case,
like me.
Yeah, just like Justin. Justin got on Ishtar too.
This is literally, oh God. This is why I need a proper pack of lore nerds. I freaking love you guys.
You can hang out with us anytime. You'll probably be the only person who voluntarily hangs out with us.
Don't say that. Don't put yourself down.
That's true. Justin, how about shout outs? I see that you're collecting a novel of them.
Yes, I'm known for my lengthy shout outs, but hey, I've got a lot of people who deserve a shout out, so you can't. First of all, DOD Chatterwhite crew, amazing, man-bag in the chat, as always. And Belle for being an amazing guest host last week, and also Bife for being an amazing guest host this week. Just can't say how much I appreciate you guys coming on and supporting, and really making. I listened to the stream with Belle on from last week just to see what my audio sounded like, and I'm literally laughing my ass off. So, you guys are amazing.
Dude,
all of our guests so far have been amazing.
We wouldn't come on if we didn't think that it was well worth our time. So seriously, like, you guys, you knock it out of the park with these. So congratulate yourself a little more. The pat on the back that you're sending towards us as, you know, guests that come on. Give yourself some more love, man. You guys, every single time that you throw one of these episodes out, I'm sitting here as a lore nerd, and I'm thinking, this is doing exactly what a lore podcast for Destiny should do, you know? It's talking about all the stuff that people get into in terms of lore. It gives everyone the grounding they need, but then it also sort of challenges those assumptions that people who are more versed in the lore make. And that is the exact kind of academic environment that this community is going to thrive on. Like, that's awesome. Seriously, like,
well, and that's what makes this community such. Yeah, and that's what makes this community such a. I mean, that's like the Guardian Radio. You know, you guys did the whole thing with the PlayStation giveaway, but I think a lot of the other thing was it kind of gave a lot of people the incentive to kind of put down their thoughts about why this game is still so popular. I mean, let's just all call a spade a spade. The game is not popular because of the game. The game is popular because of the community and the way that people treat each other in the community. And, you know, that's the thing. Even the more competitive people of the Destiny community are extremely, when you get to know them, extremely just genuinely nice. So that's, I mean, I agree. I mean, that's one of the things, you know, Justin mentioned the lore band, and it's just, I made this comment. We just actually had to get, like, I just had to kind of pass off some of the responsibilities because it's gotten such a big, I think we're at 135 people at the moment. And I'll be honest, when we kind of put this thing together back in September, I was like, oh yeah, we'll get like 15 people. You know, we'll just talk, not really think anything of it. And it's like, and we're getting like,
it's huge.
We're getting people left and right still. And it's amazing. And like we're talking right now, I'm talking to someone who's going to help us start archiving our chats to, you know, hopefully, because we're having a couple people who really want to get information from chats that the history, it doesn't go back far enough. And so we're trying to do that. I mean, like people are coming out of the woodwork to help us, and it's amazing. You know, we actually just hit 500 listens on Podbean, which to me is just, I know it's not a huge number, but for me, it's like, that's beyond any, I'm still amazed that people want to listen to us babble and laugh at each other. I mean, we get on here and our goal, and, you know, Bife, we were trying to talk about this before, our goal is to have a good time. If we're not having a good time, we're going to just move on to a different topic. Like, you know, that's kind of what we do. And it's just, it blows me away how many people are like, the feedback is very positive. You know, we have people who are asking, you know, we're thinking about doing a kind of a Lore 101 podcast / YouTube thing when, you know, when we figure out how to do YouTube, we're going to work on that. But so that's the other thing that we kind of have in the works. I mean, there's at least 2 other podcasts that people want us to start doing. We did the Halo episode last month, and like people just, Pins blew everyone away. He won't tell anybody that, but Pins is the lexicon for Halo information as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, the response has just been, every time, it's just amazing. I mean, that's the word that I just keep coming back to. So that's my shout out, is just the people who are putting up with us because it's amazing.
Yeah, and also 500 listens on Podbean.
Yeah.
Everyone who listens on Podbean, everyone who listens live, you guys are awesome. And also all the Lore Band peeps, y'all are freaking amazing. If you're in the chat right now and you'd like to get in the Lore Band, it's not an exclusive club. Anyone can get in. All you have to do is spam the hell out of Blue.
Yep. Or just follow the link that I just put in there.
No, I prefer the first one.
Okay, that works too. So, yep. I mean, that really it. I'm doing terrible at ending podcasts. I'll just be honest. I need to figure out a way to get better at this thing. I think we should let
Bife do the sign off.
All right. Bife has a sign off, so he's already ahead of us.
The sign off, though? Yeah. Do you want to do that? Because I don't know.
Just improvise a focused fire sign off. I know you got it.
Okay. I guess. That's tough. That's really tough.
Well, I mean, it's only like what, 6:30 in the morning.
We'll never play it for anyone.
We'll never play it.
Epic.
Unless it's really good, then we're going to record it and we're just going to play it over and over.
Okay. Let's try this. For more adventures with the Warband, as well as your hosts, Blue, Justin, and Willie, make sure to subscribe to Focus Fire Chat on Podbean. And in the meantime, The law band marches on.